The story resumes with a lost spearman, wandering not only physically, but within the depths of a mind that no longer reveals any trace of his former life. For days, he has been trekking through the thick jungle, a place that carries its own rhythm of life, a vitality he no longer possesses. He moves amidst the sounds of birds watching him intently from the distance and mosquitoes that quickly veer away upon realizing there is no blood to be drawn from his decaying body. Through the dense undergrowth, Lanza advances with a weary, rhythmic gait, driven by no particular destination. His feet produce an exhausting sound against the jungle floor, while his eyes remain fixed straight ahead, searching for nothing at all. He exists as a hollow vessel in an environment teeming with a pulse that has long since abandoned him, navigating the terrain with the mechanical persistence of the forgotten. In an instant, a single ray of sunlight pierces through the thick canopy, illuminating one specific plant that catches his eye. Like a moth drawn to a flame, Lanza stands there, staring at it for a long while. Nearby, hummingbirds wait with quiet patience, hovering until he finally moves on so they can resume their work among the blossoms in the stillness of the forest. After some time, Lanza resumes his journey until something new pulls at him with an irresistible force. The chirping of a cricket. Such a creature would have been insignificant if he were still alive, but now it reminds him intensely of something he has lost. The colors of the tiny animal bear a striking resemblance to those of his old friend, and for a long while, Lanza follows it through the dense woods. Desperate to be in the same space as the insect, he leaps again and again for hours, chasing it relentlessly through the undergrowth. By the time he manages to get within just a few inches of the small creature, his eyes widen in silent realization. In that moment, he realizes he was right. The insect's colors are a mirror of his companion, and it is a pure delight for him to watch as it eats a leaf or rests quietly for a spell. Lanza doesn't know why, but there is something about this tiny insect that connects deeply to his past. It isn't just the colors that remind him of Colmillo and trigger those visions in his mind. The stripes on the cricket's back evoke the memory of his mount's spine, the very one he rode into battle so many times before. But then everything changes. The cricket slips from his reach, fleeing toward a nearby meadow and vanishing among the thick leaves, hopping from place to place until it falls completely out of sight. For a few moments, Lanza believes his new friend has abandoned him. A wave of desperation and fear, emotions he hadn't felt before in this state, takes hold of his battered, decaying body. But something different happens. The cricket returns and perches right on his hand. It is a hand marked by a sickly, deathly green, yet now it also reveals a faint, rosy tint of life. Is this a sign that Lanza might one day reclaim his humanity, or is it just another flicker of false hope? To him, the only thing that matters right now is the fact that his friend is by his side once again. Lanza is able to look the tiny creature directly in the eyes, and this connection triggers yet another vision in his memory. In this one, he is stroking Colmillo's fur, and unlike the previous visions that were filled with agony, his companion does not seem to be suffering at all. This moment of peace offers a stark contrast to the rot surrounding him, bridging the gap between his grim present and a kinder past. But the cricket, having no clue about the profound emotions it is triggering in our hero, decides to go its own way. It slowly moves away before picking up the pace toward the river, crossing the water with a couple of nimble leaps, while Lanza hurries to keep it in sight. Suddenly, a long, sticky, and hostile tongue darts out from nowhere. It belongs to a lizard whose voracious appetite snatches the cricket and swallows it whole. In that heartbeat, the calm and peace Lanza had been feeling twist into a surge of rage, anger, and a desperate thirst for vengeance. With precise, calculated movements, he closes in on the lizard, grabbing it firmly with his dead hand and applying pressure. He doesn't use enough force to crush the creature, but just enough to pry its jaws open and rescue his new friend. Curled up on the lizard's tongue, the cricket lies covered in slime, yet its tiny heart is still beating. Lanza picks it up with immense care, shielding it within his hands to ensure that nothing else can cause it harm, and walks away from that dangerous spot, determined to protect the only spark of life he has left. A short while later, he finds himself by a waterfall. From there, he surveys his surroundings until he hears the cricket's song echoing from inside his hand. Upon opening his palms, he notices with a smile that his friend is doing well. The cricket allows itself to stay in his hand. Having faced death firsthand in the jaws of the lizard, it no longer senses that same threat coming from the undead man standing before it. With a flutter of its wings, it seems to thank our hero for saving its life, and Lanza remains motionless with his companion until the sun dips below the horizon and night falls. Suddenly, a cluster of glowing yellow eyes appears among the bushes, followed by the cackling laughter of creatures he has never heard before. Lanza reacts instantly with raw violence. He stands up abruptly, swings his arm, and lets out a powerful roar to drive the scavengers away. Shortly after, he returns to his spot and stays there until dawn, perfectly still, soaking in his friend's song while keeping his hands clasped together to shield the tiny creature from the dangers lurking in the shadows. When the morning sun finally emerges, Lanza allows himself to open his hands, but in an instant the cricket takes flight and speeds away from our hero. The sheer terror of losing it sends Lanza sprinting desperately through the undergrowth. He plunges into the deepest part of the woods, letting out a haunting cry for help, as if he were calling out to his old friend Colmillo in a moment of total despair. After a few seconds of agonizing silence, the cricket begins to chirp from the very top of a nearby tree. Spotting it there, Lanza grabs hold of a vine, intending to climb up to it, but even in death his body remains incredibly heavy. Despite this, the giant manages to haul himself toward the treetops, fighting his own weight every inch of the way. But at the very last second, the vine snaps under the strain, and he plummets toward the ground with violent force. His massive frame hits the earth with such velocity and power that he breaks right through the surface, ending up trapped in a subterranean cave with no clear way to escape. The hole he fell through is far too high. There is no way for him to reach it from down there, so his only option is to trek through the darkness to find an exit. The cave's absolute gloom forces him to move slowly, feeling the walls with his hands as he goes. He is unable to see what is right in front of his face, yet he refuses to stop. Suddenly he hears something behind him and knows instinctively that danger is lurking. Before he can react or even spot the threat, he hears it right beneath him. Looking down, he notices with horror that a strange, deformed, and starving creature is calmly devouring his leg. Its two enormous front fangs sink into his skin, tearing away small chunks of flesh like a monstrous version of a squirrel craving his rotting body. Without hesitation, Lanza reacts, grabbing the thing by its skull and hurling it against the cave wall. In that moment, he realizes the creature is blind, navigating solely by scent or sound as it lunges at him again, driven by its small size and oversized lethal teeth. In response to the attack, Lanza uses his foot to crush the creature's skull with his sheer body weight, splattering its blood across the floor. However, the death of one of their own does not go unnoticed by the rest of the pack. From every direction, hundreds upon hundreds of these creatures emerge, all of them furious, starving, and thirsty for his blood. They swarm Lanza in a frantic mass. Though they are small and light on their own, their numbers give them a lethal advantage. The scene fades to black with the image of our hero being dragged down by the sheer force of these beasts. When he finally manages to open his eyes, he looks around in horror to see the bodies of others hanging nearby. These were people who were alive not long ago, but now they serve only as food for these hideous creatures that seem to have a specific craving for his rotting flesh. He is trapped in a macabre larder, surrounded by the remains of those who shared his grim fate in the dark. As he looks up toward the back of the cave, Lanza witnesses one of these gruesome beasts devouring his own hand right down to the bone just a short distance away. Its kin are slowly tearing into a human body, all of them sitting in a disturbing peace, as if they were at an endless all-you-can-eat buffet. Throughout the entire cave, his brothers-in-arms form small circles to share the spoils. The human flesh is rationed and enjoyed at their leisure in the shadows. Directly in front of him, the same beasts are finishing off the parts of those who failed to escape. One can even see a small offspring devouring a leg with terrifying fervor. When he shoves the creature away from his arm, it retreats without putting up a fight, but it slowly prowls through the cave until it finds its pack. With a sharp gesture, it alerts the others that one of their food sources is still alive, making it their top priority to finish him off and secure the feast. But once the pack of beasts returns for Lanza, their entire attention shifts toward the cricket, his winged friend who has come to his rescue. It perches upon the skull of someone long gone from this world, and with its signature chirping, it becomes a source of pure torture for the monsters. Like a frenzied swarm, the small but bloodthirsty creatures lunge toward the insect, momentarily forgetting their main prey. Its torturous song causes them physical pain. Their highly developed sense of hearing has turned into a fatal weakness when faced with the smallest and most harmless of insects. With every sound the cricket emits, the monsters lose more of their patience, beginning to track it all over the cave, desperate to kill it at any cost. Like a wave of destruction, the beasts chase the cricket through the darkness while Lanza shouts at them, trying his best to draw their attention back to himself and protect his tiny savior. Looking at his devoured hand, Lanza realizes that his exposed bones have a sharp, jagged edge, so he uses them to saw through his restraints. He needs to move fast. With every new monster emerging from the gloom, the cave feels smaller, and the space for his winged friend to escape is rapidly shrinking. At one point, the entire floor is crawling with beasts, forcing the cricket to seek refuge on the ceiling. However, the creatures begin to pile on top of one another, forming a living mound of flesh just to reach and kill their agonizing visitor. In that desperate moment, Lanza lets out a deafening grunt that echoes from afar, finally drawing the beast's attention and giving the cricket a narrow window to escape. With a perfectly timed leap, the insect manages to evade them for a few precious seconds. During the brief but endless moments of his friend's flight, Lanza manages to slaughter a dozen of the beasts. He uses his jagged bone hand to impale them and his heavy fist to crush their skulls against the cave floor, turning the darkness into a scene of brutal, desperate combat. With grim determination, Lanza pushes forward, but there are far too many enemies and too little room to strike, making his progress agonizingly slow. Fortunately, his friend spreads its wings and takes flight through the cave. Everything suggests the little insect will finally make its escape. However, with a precise and well-aimed move, one of the beasts uses a bone as a weapon to strike the cricket. From across the darkness, Lanza can only watch as the bone misses his friend by just a few inches before a second blow follows. He breaks free from the crushing weight of the swarm with raw strength and sprints to help, but he doesn't make it in time. His friend is crushed by a swift, lethal strike. Its tiny body is splattered across the floor, and its exposed innards are all that can be seen from where Lanza stands. Seeing this triggers a memory of pure agony in his mind. Our hero sees Colmillo once again, his old companion suffering beyond measure. While the creature screeches in victory, Lanza loses the last shred of sanity he had left. As he stares at the dead cricket, something in his mind finally snaps, unleashing an overwhelming, world-shaking rage. Using his living fist and his bone hand, Lanza strikes the killer with such devastating force that he turns its body into pulp in a single blow. But his vengeance doesn't stop there. Catching sight of the rest of the monsters, he hurls himself at them with blind fury, slaughtering everything in his path. Using his skeletal hand as a jagged blade, he rips the skin from the creature's faces, while his other fist becomes a sledgehammer, dealing death to everything around him. However, for every beast that falls, another instantly rises to take its place. At this rate, it seems impossible for him to truly exact justice for his fallen friend. In the heat of the struggle, he grabs one of the scavengers and slams it violently against a cave wall. It is there that he spots a stash of weapons, gear that actually bears his own name. Without wasting a second, he snatches one of them, feeling the familiar weight of the steel in his grip. With his weapon finally in hand, Lanza begins to administer death in precise doses to each and every one of them, determined to turn the cave into a graveyard for the monsters that took the only spark of life he had left. With the skill reclaimed from his memories, our hero masters the spear once again, using it to run through the beasts one after another, even skewering two at a time. His assault is relentless, his rage is boundless for the moment, and the battle will only conclude when there is no one else left to kill. Without showing any anger, regret, or guilt, Lanza begins to execute the creatures in a methodical, monotonous fashion, as if he were on an assembly line dealing out death. One by one, the scavengers lunge toward him, only to have Lanza drive his weapon through their skulls with clinical precision. His gaze turns completely hollow, and his hand moves on autopilot, killing again and again in a never-ending parade of slaughter. Once the voracious snarls finally faded into silence, a sea of corpses surrounded him. Hundreds of dead beasts and a blank expression were all that remained on our hero's face. Overwhelmed by the toll of the fight and the weight of his hollow victory, he collapsed to his knees as the battle reached its inevitable end, leaving him alone in the stillness of the cavern. Directly after he approached the spot where his friend had fallen, he watched intently as the insect made its final dying movements, and then placed a few stones over its body as a sign of respect, creating a small place of rest. Once the monument was finished, Lanza stood up, revealing the devastating state of his body after the battle. His skeletal hand, his torn flesh, and his exposed chest were the heavy price exacted by the flesh-eating creatures he had just slaughtered. Suddenly, a part of his own body slipped out. An organ that was part of him, yet served no purpose now that he was undead, hit the ground and left a blood stain upon impact. In a moment of raw fear, Lanza picked up the organ and shoved it back inside himself. To prevent it from falling out again, he tore a piece of fabric from one of the poor souls hanging from the ceiling. He used the cloth to bind himself together, desperate to hold his battered frame in one piece as he prepared to leave that nightmare behind. Within a couple of minutes, he manages to put together a proper outfit that not only looks right on him but serves the vital purpose of keeping his body from falling apart. During the process, a bone-tooth necklace falls from one of the hanging skeletons. As he picks it up, Lanza is struck by a vision of Colmillo. The shape of the tooth and the silhouette of his old companion are so similar that the necklace instantly becomes a prized possession. Shortly after, Lanza leaves the heart of the cave with his new clothes and weapon in hand, wearing the necklace and walking with a much sharper rhythm than before. He soon realizes, however, that there is no other exit. The only way to leave this dark hole is through the same opening where he fell in. Reaching that height is impossible unless he can build some kind of structure. That's when it hits him to use the bodies of the monsters he slaughtered. He slowly heads back and begins to stack the beasts' corpses one by one. With grim determination, he builds a massive pile of carcasses strong enough to hold his weight, finally allowing him to climb out of the cave and escape the shadows. Once he is back in the jungle, Lanza continues walking aimlessly for a few minutes until suddenly he hears the song of his lost friend once more. Turning around, he realizes there are more crickets all around him, identical to the one he lost, and with those same eyes that trigger the visions of Colmillo. All around him, Lanza sees dozens of crickets that seem to be welcoming him into their fold with their rhythmic chirping. In that exact moment, the vision of Colmillo turns comforting at last. There is no longer any trace of pain or loss, only the pure bond that unites them remains, reflected in the image of a hand resting gently upon his friend. Surrounded by the cricket's melody, Lanza finds a peace he thought was lost forever amidst the decay of his own body and the violence of the cave. The forest, which once felt hostile, now seems to vibrate in sync with his memory, offering him a silent solace as the crickets continue their chorus beneath the forest canopy.